Good afternoon, everybody. You are all most welcome to this 10th session in the Keeping the Dream Alive series by the World Tourism Association for Culture and Heritage, My Travel Research, and Low Season Traveller. I'd like to give a special welcome to all of our World Tourism Association for Culture and Heritage members, and of course, all of our supporters, which you can see below. Before we get started, and while we're waiting for the last few people to join us, just a few general housekeeping rules, which regulars will be well aware of. You're all on mute to avoid background noise, but please do use the chat function. Let us know you're here, say hi, and we will of course greet you back. Also, during the session, please do send any questions which you have from today's session via the questions function, which you should see on your GoToWebinar toolbar. We'll aim to get through as many as we possibly can during the Q&A section, but I would just emphasize, please do use this area for specific questions to the speaker rather than general comments. Use the comments box for observations generally, and we'll also read out those as and when appropriate. All sessions will be recorded, and we will send out links to the recordings shortly after each session. We'll also release the Q&A from each session as a podcast on the Low Season Traveller Insider Guides podcast series, which you can find on iTunes, Spotify, and the wetac.org website. You'll find the entire session from last week with Luke, as well as other sessions that we've had so far. We'll also be releasing the slides for each of the presentations. So if anybody would like the slides, you can email us and we'll get those sent out to you. So as I said, this is the 10th session in a series of 12 where we're hearing from global experts in the fields of marketing and communications, tourism data, aviation, hospitality, and many more. Please do sign up to the whole series and feel free to share the links with your friends and industry colleagues. Finally, we can't provide any of these sessions without the very kind and generous support of our partners for this series. So again, huge thanks to all of our partners, which you can see listed out on the screen just now. So let me introduce myself. For those that don't know me, my name is Jed Brown, and I'm the founder of Low Season Traveller and also the Managing Director EMEA of the World Tourism Association for Culture and Heritage. And it's my honour to be your moderator for this entire series. Oh, I noticed I haven't got my mic down. We're delighted to have the perfect speaker for this subject today. The subject is Crisis and Careers Navigating the Storm. Karen Priest is the principal of Smart Tourism, a boutique marketing consultancy which provides strategic solutions and advice to the tourism industry. Also, she's the co-director of Tourism Talent Australia, a tourism recruitment and development consultancy originally launched by fellow tourism talent directors in New Zealand. Karen has over 30 years experience in tourism and hospitality, having held several diverse senior management roles in marketing, business development and communications in Western Australia, New Zealand, South Africa and the United Kingdom. She has gained significant experience working for various regional, state and national destination marketing agencies, including Tourism Australia, Tourism Western Australia, New Caledonia Tourism, Australia's Southwest and Mundura, excuse the pronunciation, and Peel Tourism Organisation. She's also worked in private enterprise in hotel management roles, the wine industry and the caravan and camping sector. She has previously served on various boards and committees, including the Perth Convention Bureau, the Western Australia branch of the Australia Tourism Export Council, Fremantle Chamber of Commerce and Friends of the Bibulmun Track. Excuse the pronunciation again. She previously sat on the marketing advisory panel for Tourism Western Australia and has served as a board director of the Tourism Council Western Australia, Western Australia's peak tourism industry body for 4 years. She has an extensive network of contacts within tourism, media and the public and private sectors in Australia and overseas. She's also passionate about tourism development and marketing and is highly regarded by the industry as an expert and leader in her field. Karen feels privileged to currently serve as a commissioner on the board of Tourism Western Australia as well. Karen, please do join us. A very good afternoon to you. It's great to have you with us.
Good afternoon, Jed, and thank you for your very kind introduction. And hello, everyone. I'm really delighted to be here today, and a very warm welcome to our webinar, Crisis and Careers Navigating the Storm. And thanks, Jed, to yourself, Chris and Carolyn for the opportunity of being here during what I call these challenging and still unpredictable times. We do value all of you tuning in today because I know it's a hectic time for most. Tourism's been my passion and my career and main source of income for at least 30 years plus. working in a number of countries across the accommodation sector and destination marketing roles, as Jed outlined just now. In more recent times, I've turned to recruitment. And I know that you'll agree, no matter where you are dialing in from today, that COVID has really brought our world to a standstill, and particularly our industry sector. In the words of the World Tourism Organization, it's been the worst affected of all major economic sectors. In 2009, of course, our industry was in a much better place. According to the World Travel and Tourism Council's latest annual research, in conjunction with Oxford Economics, it showed the travel and tourism sector experienced 3.5% growth in 2019, outpacing the global economy growth of 2.5% for the 9th consecutive year. Over the past 5 years, 1 in 4 new jobs were created by the sector, making travel and tourism the best partner for governments to generate employment. Just looking at some of the stats in 2019, travel and tourism's direct, indirect, and induced impact accounted for around $8.9 trillion in contribution to the world's GDP, 10.3% of global GDP, and a whopping 330 million jobs. That's 1 in 10 jobs around the world. $1.7 trillion in visitor exports, and also a whopping 948 billion US worth of capital investment. Then, of course, unexpectedly, and none of us wanted it, COVID-19 came along. So on the 26th of March 2020, the World Tourism Organization released its updated assessment of the likely impact of COVID-19 on international tourism. Taking into account the unparalleled introduction of travel restrictions across the world, the Agency for Tourism expects that international tourist arrivals will be down somewhere between 20 and 30% in 2020 when compared with 2019 figures. However, of course, the World Tourism Organization does stress that these numbers are based on the latest developments as the global community faces up to this unprecedented social and economic challenge. So figures, as always, should be interpreted with a little bit of caution in view of the uncertain nature of the current crisis. An unexpected fall of 20 to 30% could translate into a decline in international tourism receipts of somewhere between 300 and 450 billion US dollars. That's almost around 1/3 of what was generated in 2019. I think it's also important to note that around 80% of all tourism businesses are small and medium-sized enterprises or SMEs. And the tourism sector, along a number of years, has led the way in providing employment opportunities for a very diverse range of people, including youth and rural and regional communities. And of course, in addition to the impact of the loss of international arrivals, in some countries, and Australia where I live is an example of that, where we've actually closed in Western Australia some of those internal domestic borders in order to stop the spread of the virus, which of course has had a further impact until recent times on our tourism sector, and especially in those regional areas that need tourism the most. When it comes to jobs and careers, we've already seen our industry decimated as a result of COVID. And I'll just look at some of those stats with you now. So we've seen millions of people in tourism, travel, hospitality, aviation, and more having been made redundant or furloughed as a result of this pandemic. When we look at some of these numbers and review the global figures, according to this report undertaken by Statista, the global travel and tourism market is predicted to see a loss of around 100.8 million jobs worldwide in 2020. The region that is supposed to see the biggest loss of jobs is the Asia Pacific region, losing approximately 63.4 million jobs and around 25.6 of those in China alone. While Europe is predicted to be the second hardest hit, with a forecasted employment drop of around 13 million. And I'm sure that all of you will agree those numbers are quite alarming. However, on a more positive note in its assessment, the World Tourism Organization underlines tourism's historic resilience and capacity to create jobs after crisis situations. And of course, we saw evidence of this earlier on in this series when Chris Flynn demonstrated how the tourism sector bounced back after a number of historic global crises. Unfortunately, some of you who are dialing in today might be casualties at this time, having lost your own job, closed or put your business temporarily on hold, or had to make others redundant. And let's face it, losing your job, whether it's your job, business, or any income, is considered one of life's most stressful experiences. And it's difficult at any time, never mind during a pandemic. And unfortunately, myself, I'm also talking from experience. I moved back to Western Australia, I think it was around 2010, and it was roughly at the end of the mining boom, and I was made redundant 3 times in 3 years due to company closures or relocations. During this pandemic, it's very easy to say, oh, look, we're all in the same boat. The widespread nature of this crisis means we shouldn't blame ourselves for this situation. But of course, that's of little comfort when we've got mortgages to pay, bills to pay, and family to feed. It's, you know, even though we know we're not alone and many people are faced with the same insecurity, it's still very easy to feel overwhelmed about when and where you're going to find your next opportunity. How long is it going to take to find work? Especially, I think, if you've had a long-term career in the tourism industry like many of us have. There are so many unknowns. None of us has a crystal ball, and you may feel like you don't have any control over your life or know what the future is going to hold. You might feel no sense of purpose, and you may also feel undervalued. I know I certainly did when I was made redundant. You tend to get to feel anxious, and if you're not handling anxiety well, you don't need some, or you don't have some tips and tricks to handle anxiety well, that can lead to a downward spiral and depression very quickly. Some of you right now, you might be rebounding yourself from redundancy, or you might have been in the unenviable situation where you've yourself had to lay off a number of staff. And I know also from experience that that can be equally confronting. It's important to remember that it's the position that is being made redundant, not the person. So I do say to people, don't take it too personally. And I know that's a very easy statement to make. It is important, though, to know your rights, and if you're making somebody redundant, that those people know their rights as well, and that all options have been considered. It's very important not to keep analysing things, try to put the past behind you and try to look forward. Very importantly, and I know it's common sense, but you need to look after yourself first. We all hear that on an aircraft, put your oxygen mask on first. You have to do that before you can get ahead and take care of others too. It means consistency. It means daily exercise, healthy eating habits, a good night's sleep, drinking plenty of water. All of those things need to become part of your routine. And you need to have a routine, set a daily plan and stick to that. Some days, and I know this also from experience, it can be very challenging, but this helps you develop a healthy and positive mindset. It will help you stay focused. Now is the time to turn your energy into decisive action. I also think it's important to believe and visualize that you are on your path to something new and exciting, even though you don't know now what that is. It's really important to assess your finances early on and determine commitments that can be scaled back or parked while you rein in your spending. You need to revise your budget and make some sacrifices. You may have to suspend non-essential memberships and subscriptions. You might not be able to treat your kids to something new. But remember, this is a temporary situation. When it comes to people, if you're in the fortunate position of still being in a role, either in your own job and leading a team or in your own business, during these times, transparency, empathy, and compassion are key. People are not just worried about their jobs, they're worried about health, they are worried about their family's health, financial security, and more. And this applies not just for your teams, but being empathetic with all people that you work with and you're coming into contact with in any organisation. I also think as a leader, it's very easy to be a leader when things are going smoothly, but much harder when times are tough. All of the things that I'm talking about here, of course, are not just leadership qualities during a crisis. In my opinion, these are key leadership qualities that should be adopted at all times. But sadly, not all leaders operate in this way generally. It's really imperative to make teams aware of where they can receive free counselling or have access to support or online tools that will help them. I've always found that employees that are cared for will actually care for your organisation too. Communication, it's about engaging and communicating regularly with a team that I'm working with at the moment remotely. I actually have a daily, at the start of the day, a daily Zoom meeting with them where we have our coffee. It's just a quick half an hour around the table and we talk about what's on for that day. And everybody tells me they value it because we all have some communication and we're all fired up at the start of our daily work. It's just a quick half an hour. We also have a weekly work in progress meeting via Zoom as well. I think one key thing to remember is that when we give our team the freedom to work from home, or by necessity they may have to work from home, we have to trust that they will get the job done and not keep checking on them, or just trust that the job will get done. I've provided my team with a list of tips for working from home because for some people, working from home is a very big adjustment to make. Flexibility. Some people may have children and their job, they may have a job that can be done in the evening rather than during traditional daytime hours. And so you may consider if it's a job that your employees can do at night after the kids go to bed, that could be something that you offer as part of flexibility. In terms of support, remind your team that just because you're not in the office or the same building doesn't mean you're not there to support them. You still have an open door policy, but it's just via Zoom, just not through the door in the office. In our industry here, I've seen lots of innovation, as I'm sure you have around the world, but in our industry here, one of our regional tourism organisations organised a Friday get-together called Friday Fizz, where everyone in the industry could tune in late on a Friday afternoon for drinks and to share information. This has been a great success, and it's enabled the industry to work together, collaborate and talk about the future and look at ways that we can move forward together. So there are lots of things you can do to stay connected, not just with your teams, but with the industry as a whole. If you're working from home, it can take some getting used to, and I think many of us felt like that in the beginning when we first started working from home. Whilst technology has been great at enabling us to do this, there are a few things to consider to ensure that you stay motivated and make the most out of your working day. Act as if you are going to the office. No good sitting there in your pajamas. I say, shower, wear comfortable business attire and dress for success. And I've done this even before when I've been job hunting. If you dress the part and you feel the part, then it has helped me in the right mindset address job hunting as well. I actually know a lady who used to get into her car and drive around the block to help her feel like she'd actually gone to work and then just drive back into the driveway and go to her desk. Now, of course, I'm not suggesting that you have to go to those lengths unless it works for you, but some of these tips have definitely helped me be more productive. Having a designated office space is key. Not everyone has the luxury of an office, but a small area and workstation that is yours is required. I also believe it's important to have a schedule, as you would if you were working at any office, and start early if you can. If you're in a role that doesn't require you to be working during the day, as said earlier, your organisation might be happy to accommodate different hours as long as that job gets done. An important thing that I'm not so good at, but trying harder, is it's very important to take regular breaks away from the desk. Maybe go for a walk around the block at lunchtime or take a break and do some stretches. And of course, as many of us know, very easy to be distracted from working when you're working from home with barking dogs. Children might demand your attention. Also, I've found friends and others think it's okay to phone you anytime during the day because you're working from home. It means that you can take personal calls at any time. So you do need to set boundaries. But act as if you're in the office, schedule your calls, use do not disturb functions and noise cancelling headphones and the like. Some people like background noise that helps them feel that they're not on their own, such as the TV. I prefer ambient concentration music that helps me sort of concentrate. Very importantly, the last point is knowing when to switch off. And once again, that's something I'm not very good at, but trying to get better at. Very easy to lose track of time when you're enjoying your work. And I've been very guilty of this, still sitting in the office when my family's been waiting for their dinner. So I think it's really important that we learn to switch off and know when to shut the office door or office space. In terms of navigating the storm, of course, buoyancy for the tourism sector, it's dependent on so many things. It's dependent on factors such as consumer confidence to travel again, the return of aviation access to our destinations, and in fact, people even having discretionary income to spend on travel and holidays. And of course, all of these factors have a massive flow-on effect to our sector and to employment in turn. I think it's also important to remember that it's not just business as usual. It was tough enough to get a job, to be honest, just before COVID. Searching for a new job has been challenging enough before COVID was here. But if you and your business or yourself as an individual employee have been impacted by this, how do we navigate this storm when we absolutely can't see what lies ahead? Ultimately, of course, it's about survival. And in order to navigate the storm, I think these are three things that we need to be doing first, and that's adapting, developing, and certainly thriving. And of course, this seems like common sense, but you may be surprised how many people flounder when they don't have a plan in place to steer and plot their course ahead. So I'm going to just share with you today some basic thoughts and suggestions, which I hope will help you on your career journey. When it comes to adapting, how do we transition from what used to be normal to the new normal, whatever that looks like? We need to have a plan, and it's about attitude and changing our internal mindset. We need to be agile and flexible in our approach, and once again, that's not always easy to do. We need to embrace change. Change is how we grow, and I think the days of holding a long-term job, many of our parents, stayed in the same role for 10 to 20 years or more, it's no longer the norm. In the interim of finding your next dream job, you might have to consider something completely different, if only to survive. And I think we have to remind ourselves not to be too proud about doing this. We do learn from all new experiences in life. Consider this as a time to take a step back, pause and reset. And I've thought, just taking a day out to plot out your thoughts and think about how you can embrace the change. It could be a really great opportunity for you. And it might be a chance to reflect on what you really want. I can tell you when I was made redundant, those number of times when coming back to Western Australia, I thought, look, I might as well be self-employed again. It made me realise that actually I prefer working for myself than for somebody else. And I wanted to be in control of my own destiny. Yes, it's very hard work, but it's also very rewarding. And I could then pick the kind of work that I wanted to do as well. So my question to you today is, could this be an opportunity for you to perhaps consider a different career path? It might be a new industry sector or role. Is there something you've always wanted to do? Have you considered yourself setting up your own business using the knowledge and expertise you've acquired during your career to help other people? In terms of developing, what I did when I was first made redundant, I think it's really healthy to do this, is evaluate your experience throughout your career. Don't pigeon yourself into a specific job role. So, in my last job, I was Chief Executive Officer of a destination marketing organisation. It doesn't mean that's the only job title or job I can do. Assess the full range of skills and characteristic attributes you have, which are highly transferable to new positions and industry sectors that perhaps you may not yet have considered. You can also ask friends and family about your key strengths and areas of development, and I'm sure they're going to be quite honest with us about those areas. That will help you determine which roles and sectors might suit you best. I also think writing an extensive list of the skills that you excel at, so that could be something like negotiating, mentoring, problem solving, working with people, paying attention to what you're great at, and also importantly, what you actually enjoy doing most. In these terrible times, I've recently seen a lot of tourism people who, of course, are great at customer service move into roles in call centres. I've seen chefs from hotels move into chef roles or food and beverage roles in aged care centres and so on during COVID-19. Something else that I've done before when I've been feeling down after a redundancy or not knowing the way forward, I've reviewed previous thank you emails, letters, awards and accolades that I've received during my career, which helped me to retain my confidence and belief in myself, which is really key during these times. Remember, you haven't failed. This situation was not of your making. I think it's really important to consider learning new talents, and my belief is that we're never too old to learn. I went, for example, from having a team of marketers to suddenly being a sole trader and having to be hands-on at things like digital marketing. And even though I was great at directing the traffic in what I needed at a strategic level in digital marketing, I had no idea how to post on social media. So I had to upskill very quickly. And in this day and age, we're very lucky to have so many free online courses and webinars online that can help us through these trying times. I'm a firm believer that learning never ends. So, how to survive? You already have a new full-time job. Your new full-time job is finding your next opportunity. And you should dedicate as much time as you need to make this happen. That is your new full-time role. When it comes back to getting on that career path, it means dedicated time, effort, and action. All of these things, once again, seem like common sense, but you do need to constantly work on these if you want to succeed. When did you last update your LinkedIn profile? Do you have recommendations and endorsement of your key skills by others that you've worked with? Have you shown that you're actually open for job opportunities? Network, network, network. Be proactive. Reach out to the networks that you already have, letting everyone know that you're seeking new opportunities. Make new contacts. Follow like-minded groups and connect with new people. Very important to have a compelling resume that shows your transferable skills, and make sure that you're tailor making each cover letter and your resume to suit each application that you submit, so that you're using keywords that appear in any ads or that resonate well with that or vacancy or organization. Each application should be different. If you are looking at online job sites, obviously set up job alerts as well. And last but not least, and I think very importantly, consider what we call the gig economy. So the gig economy, I believe that one of the biggest opportunities we have to survive as a tourism sector and employees during and beyond this crisis is via the gig economy. The definition of gig economy, if you look that up, states it's a labour market characterised by the prevalence of short-term contracts or freelance work as opposed to permanent jobs. Technology platform companies have been a major force in the expansion of the gig economy since it started. But I think in our part of the world, certainly here in Australia, I'm not sure if any of you have comments later about your own parts of the world, but certainly here in Australia, we generally think of things like Uber, Ola, Upwork, Fiverr, Airbnb, and so on. So I would say that our tourism sector has not really been an early adopter of the gig economy. And of course, the gig economy was happening long before COVID. And as I've said earlier, gone were the days of working 9 to 5. It's becoming more and more common for people to derive an income from a range of different sources, where workers are paid per project or per job. Also, you've got to remember that businesses might be struggling right now, but some will need help resetting strategies and looking at how they're going to do things differently as we go forward. And they're going to need some high-level skill sets to look at those strategies with them. So I think the gig economy could be a win-win for all in our industry. Recently, our business, Tourism Talent, launched Gig Connect, which was an initiative by our founders and directors in New Zealand, Jason Hall and Dylan Rushbrook, who I believe are on the call with us today. So hello, Jason and Dylan, if you're out there. And in Jason's words, in a recent article in New Zealand, the Tourism Ticker, Jason says, what we're going to see from employers as they come out of survival and into recovery mode is how they can have access to a senior level of strategic thinking without necessarily applying the same cost structures that they've had to do historically. The whole concept of outsourcing in the gig economy makes contracting virtual CFOs or CMOs a lot of sense for small to medium-sized businesses as they recover. They may get back to a position where they can bring those skills back in-house, and if so, that's great. But maybe as things change, they may consider contracting these roles in and as required as part of their longer-term strategy. So let's take a look at some of the global gig economy stats. Now, these are some old stats. They're late 2019, included in a report by Small Business Genius, just highlighting how the gig economy was back then. So it was already doing well before this time. According to McKinsey, 20 to 30% of the workforce in the US and the EU 15 countries at that time were involved in the gig economy. That equates to around 162 million working age people engaged in some sort of non-traditional work. In the UK, according to The Guardian, the gig economy doubled in size between 2016 and 2019, comprising of 4.7 million workers. That's 1 in 10 working age adults at that time. The Association of Independent Professionals and the Self-Employed tells us that between 2008 and 2015, the number of freelancers increased by 24% in the EU, which equated to around 9.6 million people. In late 2019, the same report, according to Upwork, the world's top freelancing site, 90% of independent workers in the US believe the gig economy will only improve as the time goes on. Their research also indicates that people between the ages of 18 and 34 are best represented amongst freelancers, with 42% of them engaged in independent work. However, closer to home for me in the Asia-Pacific economic region, according to a report undertaken by the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Tourism Working Group, they obtained data from Uber, Airbnb and crowd workers, and that suggests that average gig workers in this region are not young millennials, but they're prime age workers between the ages of 25 and 55. Forbes, though, reports that by 2025, millennials will constitute most of the world's workforce, 75% to be exact. So when we consider that young people freelance more than any other generation, this does suggest a positive future for the gig economy as a whole. According to the Intuit 2020 report on the future of gig work, more than 80% of US-based large companies at that time said they would greatly increase their use of non-traditional workers in the coming years. Now, of course, I know that since these numbers were put out in late 2019, the world has changed considerably. But I do believe that we are going to see more people earning their income in this way as we navigate through COVID-19. Many of my friends, including myself and my partner, right now, we're doing it already, deriving an income from our business and then perhaps 3 or 4 other sources. So I'd encourage you to open your mind to becoming part of the gig economy, whether you are somebody who wants to work on projects yourself as part of a freelancer approach, or whether you're a business considering how you can still have access to strategic skill sets and keeping your overheads down at the same time. The great news is that most roles are immediate starts. They offer more flexibility and, of course, are a great way to supplement your income. It allows you to gain further experience in different organisations, maybe also come across different management styles or different ways in which organisations do things. And, of course, it can often lead to ongoing business and full-time work. If you're an individual considering it, of course, there are some cons, I suppose, as opposed to the pros, and they're just making us being aware of being realistic about these things. You have to adapt to not having a regular paycheck. You don't get paid sick leave or annual leave, and you do need to, of course, plan ahead for unforeseen risks, such as health or injuries, etc. For businesses, of course, it means lower overheads, which I think for businesses is great. And for example, an example that Jason uses, you could contract a chief marketing officer, let's say for 20 hours a month at an hourly rate of $150 an hour as an example, and that translates to 36 Australian dollars per year. And you could get quite a lot achieved in that time, insights and intelligence from someone like that in a shorter window of time. This allows businesses to have agility and flexibility. And as an agency, for example, ourselves at Tourism Talent, we just charge a small commission on the hourly rate of any earnings. Let's also take a look at some trends that we're seeing during this time. Of course, some sectors have had no alternative to close or pause right now, even though that might be temporary. We've seen that across our sector: aviation, hotels, restaurants, cafes, bars, museums, and the like. However, some sectors are scaling up, such as supermarket chains. We've seen around 21,000 additional staff be taken on by our 2 major supermarket chains here in Australia. Healthcare as well, particularly aged care, is another area where we've seen growth. Call centres as well. And I'm sure many of you saw the news back in April that Amazon hired something like an additional 75,000 workers, adding more warehouse and delivery workers to help meet a surge in demand, which is tied to the coronavirus outbreak. Of course, working from home has become the norm, with our virtual meetings via Zoom and the like being part of our every working day. The old way, the new way. Well, businesses who've had to pivot during this pandemic may consider some of these trends the new way to do business in the future. For example, can they cut their overheads as part of their longer term strategy? Do they really need that big corporate office on the right side of town? Do they need to send employees overseas for meetings when virtual meetings are now the norm? Do they need as many staff, or will they consider hiring teams of specialists on a contract basis for projects and embrace the gig economy? They may also consider that employees working from home as an ongoing option for the long term. Many people working from home right now tell me, and I'm one of those myself, they get so much more achieved than when they're working in an open plan office. So businesses might actually be seeing so much more productivity right now. I also want to mention as well that, some people are still hiring. So what changes have we seen in recruitment during this time? Some say recruitment is on hold, but it's certainly not everywhere, even in the last few days. I've had people contacting me here in Australia looking for a couple of roles. And we've already mentioned those sectors that are hiring as demand surges. I also just hopped online to look at LinkedIn in the last 7 days, the postings that are showing up in the last 7 days. So as much as they're not at the level they were, USA on LinkedIn is showing something like 1,500 vacancies in the tourism sector, just under 2,000 across the EU, over 1,000 in the UK, and about 2,000 in Australia, around 300 or so in India. And these are just one or two sites that I've looked at, so I've not looked comprehensively. Of course, virtual interviews, although they've been done often previously, they're much more a thing of the norm now. And it's really important to ensure that you have a great backdrop if you're being interviewed online, appropriate lighting and good equipment, and ensure that there are no distractions, mobiles on silent. And as in any interview, grooming and body language is so important as if you were going to a normal interview in person. I always say overdress, not underdress, be engaged, make eye contact, nod when listening to others, and whatever you do, rehearse beforehand. How do you look on camera? Test your technology. Have your laptop at the level slightly above you, which is more flattering, and be patient through the recruitment process. Don't hassle recruiters. It's highly probable that they too are going through a challenging time in their own business. In the words of Albert Einstein, I'm a firm believer that in the midst of every crisis lies great opportunity. And one thing I do know is that our industry, tourism, travel, hospitality, no matter where you are in the world, we're a very passionate people and we don't give up easily. Our industry is built on relationships and resilience, and we do always bounce back. I believe that opportunity does lie just ahead, but our success is very dependent on how we navigate the storm, how adaptable we can be, and also how we develop. We've also got to be flexible and consider options that come to us. So my question in closing to you is this: what steps will you take today, either as an individual or in your own business, to ensure that you get your career or your business back on track, not just to survive, but to ensure you thrive in this new world? And whilst you're pondering that question, I just wanted to share with you some great books that have helped me through my redundancies, and I'm sure there are many more out there. So a great book called What Colour is Your Parachute? That cover I show there is the 2020 one. It's just been relaunched, and that's a practical manual for job hunters and career changers. So if you're stuck on your journey, it really helps you through the process. That publication gets revised and reprinted on a regular basis. Another great one is by John Lees. I think we all love this title, How to Get a Job You Love. And last but not least, a bit of light-hearted humour about a serious subject is Fat, 40 and Fired by Nigel Marsh, who who, if you haven't seen him, is also a great public speaker. Also at Tourism Talent, we're here to assist. Our website is on the screen for you. If you're looking for a new role or keen to hear more about our new Gig Connect program, please reach out to us via our website or via LinkedIn. I really thank you very much for tuning in today. We really do appreciate your time, and I do wish each and every one of you success with your future career path and business. So Jed, I'm happy to take questions if time now permits.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Karen. Really great presentation and some great insights there. I just love the title of that book, Fat 40 and Fired. I think there should be one for Fat 50 and Fired as well, however. But anyway.
Jed, I'm thinking of writing that one.
No, I might beat you to it. You never know.
Yeah, but Nigel, he's a really great guy, and I know that it's a serious subject, so I'm not trying to make it lighthearted. But I think in these times, it just helps us sort of reevaluate things, and touch wood, we've still got our health and well-being, and if you've got that, then you've got the wherewithal to find and put some energy, I guess, into decisive action, is what I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely right. So if the audience could start putting through their questions, and I'm sure we'll have lots of questions for you, Karen. Just in the meantime, some of the thoughts which sort of jumped out to me, you talked at the outset of, there's some pretty scary figures out there at the beginning. One of them, 100 million jobs lost worldwide and 63 million job losses in Asia Pacific. And I was just making notes at the time. We always hear that we shouldn't take redundancies personally, and that it's the role, as you mentioned, it's the role that's being made redundant, not the person. But of course, I was the person doing that job, so it affects me personally. But how do recruiters? How do they view people who have been made redundant? I think sometimes people seem to think that maybe there is a stigma attached if you've been made redundant. Is it okay to be upfront about the fact that you've been made redundant, and how do recruiters view that?
Look, in my opinion, as a recruiter myself, and this just works for me, there might be other recruiters on the line or out there who do things differently, but I always believe about transparency and honesty. And of course, if your job is on your resume, with your permission, we're going to do reference checks anyway. So what I do myself on my own resume, and you heard me say earlier, unfortunately, when I first came back to Western Australia, I had a succession of redundancies where I looked up to the sky and thought, what have I done wrong? And so to be clear, what I do on my own resume, I actually have a section at the end of each job that says reason for leaving. And I just typed in there, position made redundant due to company relocating to Sydney or something like that, whatever is appropriate for that particular job. And especially if you've only had a short window at that job, it shows that there is a reason you left and you were not there for a longer period of time. So that's certainly helped me, and I've been quite upfront about it, and touch wood, that hadn't impacted on any role I went for, because most times it's about the restructure of a business and companies being more looking at their costs and looking at how they can cut back on overheads and so on, especially in these times.
I think you gave some great advice as well, I think, for people who maybe have found themselves either furloughed or made redundant. And I was reflecting on this myself. So like yourself, Karen, I've been made redundant a couple of times in my career. And I've also been in the position where I've had to let people go and make people redundant. And I'm sure there's people on the call today that have been through both. For me, the most traumatic actually was letting people go. When I've done that, I've always reflected that actually I would rather be let go than have to let people go. I found that emotionally absolutely, devastating. Is that your experience as well? Do you find that's the bigger risk or threat is people really falling apart emotionally when they're having to be the one making people redundant?
Jed, I'll give you an example of my own experience too, and I couldn't agree with you more. And I had a terrible experience. In fact, I consider it to be what I called not say life-changing, but it certainly was character building, if you like. So I worked for an organisation, one of the redundancies I mentioned earlier, where they made the whole team redundant. There was about 35 staff. They made the whole team redundant because they were relocating to Sydney. And there was a couple of us that were offered the opportunity to go to Sydney, but most of us declined. However, they gave us a 6-month notice period. So my particular team, I was the National Sales and Marketing Director, so my team of 12 people had to still work for 6 months knowing that they did not have a job at the end of it. Wow. We put all the right things in place, counselling and everything else. But I remember one day going into the counsellor and she said, "Oh, you hear about the team?" And I said, No, I'm here about myself, because to your point, I actually found that absolutely destroying. I had 53-year-old men coming into my office in tears because they've just built a new house and they had 5 kids, etc., etc. And so I found it absolutely heartbreaking. However, if I use that example, there is always, I like to be positive and think there is a silver lining. And all of those people that I mentioned, the team of 12, are all in contact with me now. And guess what? They've gone on to bigger and better things, or they've opened a new business. And so even though at the time they couldn't see it, it enabled them to move to something else. But it is very stressful.
It's that thing about, I suppose, and it was mentioned by, I think it was actually Tammy last week, that was Tammy Marshall that was talking about this as well, about, the most important thing is handling these redundancies with, with compassion and humanity. And if handled in the right way, then, you can still retain that relationship. And, who knows, that might be a strong relationship which you'll have in the future.
Yeah, and it's all about that, Jed. And I saw a terrible thing during COVID. I saw something that had crossed somebody's desk that basically said in writing to the person, if you get offered another job, then I suggest you take it. And I would suggest to you that's a terrible way, obviously, to communicate with your people. So I think it's about engagement. It's about sitting on a one-to-one. And if the people obviously want support with them, you have to let them know that, you're having a meeting with them and you need to have an important discussion, and they're welcome to bring a support person with them. And you have to be empathetic and compassionate. And of course, in those meetings, and you've been there and I have, and I'm sure many others on the call have too, you never know how the individuals are going to react. There might be grief, there might be anger, and we have to be able to, show compassion in those times and try to be empathetic. So that's really important.
So another thing which kind of struck me, we're saying that the estimates are that there's 100 million jobs that have been lost, 65 million in Asia Pacific. Does that mean that as an industry now, to function onto the pre-COVID levels, if we're assuming that that's the aim, that we need to recruit up to 100 million workers for the travel and tourism industry over the coming months to get back up to full swing?
Well, it would sort of seem like that, wouldn't it? I mean, at the end of the day, also that, there may be people right now who, because of the need to survive, they have to actually stop their position in tourism career and move to something else. And I've seen people do that, as I've mentioned already, where chefs and others, because there is no work currently, they've had to then move into areas like aged care. And I'll just pick up on chefs, if I may, because certainly in Australia and New Zealand, that is an area where we actually need more chefs, and we sometimes have a shortage. We've got roles for chefs, but not enough people to fill them. And that's where, of course, I think as part of development, it's also about the younger people. Our education sectors and our training needs to also try to encourage people into our sector. And I think, Jed, to see the tourism industry as what I call a serious industry, so no matter where you are, I think we see a lot of people as young people. They might be studying let's say they might be studying for a law degree or an engineering degree or something like that, and they may get a part-time job as a barista, for example, and think, well, tourism's going to help me whilst I'm studying for my bigger degree. However, what I'd love to see, and maybe this gives us the opportunity as a sector, is to develop the younger people coming through and look at, trying to educate people that tourism has got some amazing opportunities across all different elements of the sector, whether that be aviation, hospitality, tourism, travel. There's a whole range of different career paths that people can take. So I think it's twofold. It's the recruitment side, but it's also getting into educate the younger people that will be our future, that tourism is a fantastic industry. I know it's been fantastic to me, and I'm sure many of the other people on the call would agree with that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's been a great industry to me as well, and to a lot of my friends. You also talked about the gig economy, and the growth of the gig economy in recent years. Great, interesting stat there in the UK. 1 in 10 workers in the UK is currently in the gig economy. I hadn't realised how big it was getting. Do you foresee a time when the majority of workers in the tourism industry will be effectively self-employed in the gig economy?
Look, I don't have a crystal ball, Jed. I wish I did.
Me
But
too.
certainly, I'd be a rich lady. But anyway, it's certainly something that I think we have seen more and more of. And even if I look locally in my own regions or regions that I work with across Australia and New Zealand, we've certainly seen, even pre-COVID, people like myself and others saying, you know what, I want to work for myself. And as a result of that, a lot of businesses have come through saying, you know, I've got a project here. It might be only a number of hours, or I need help doing a new strategy or development and so on. So if I look at myself and other consultants I know as example, many of them are now, they've given up their full-time job as a CEO or a general manager and the like, and they're actually just now working as consultants for a range of different people, whether that's government or private sector. So I do think we're going to see more of it. And I think if our industry embraces it, it's a great opportunity for businesses to actually keep their overheads low, as I said earlier, but also have access to people in our industry with great skills and initiatives. So I think that's a great advantage of the gig economy.
It seems to work really, really well for everybody, because obviously, like you said, it's a great way for organizations to get, to get really, really experienced people without the commitment of the colossal salary, but also for the individuals, you're part of the gig economy, I'm part of the gig economy, and it works really well for us because, we get to be our own boss, we get to set our own times. You work, as you pointed out, you work outrageously hard. But then, for many people, and I'm sure it's many people the way on the call as well, I've worked for large organizations all my life, and I've always worked pretty much 24/7. And I always used to think, God, I couldn't imagine working any harder if I was working for myself. When people would say, hey, you should work for yourself, but it's really hard work. It's like, well, I'm working flat out anyway for these companies. I may as well do it for myself, right?
Jed, I couldn't agree more. And I say the same thing. And, as I alluded to earlier, it's also helped me learn new skills, which is fantastic because, often I look around and think, oh, where's my digital marketing team, or where's my, HR team? And I go, oh, it's me. I've got to do it all, But I think that's made me take on new skills that then have been more attractive as well to other companies who have hired me to do work. And I also think what I enjoy about it, Jed, is every project is different. So, I've got the recruitment sort of area that I'm working with as a director with tourism talent. I'm working with some local government business at the moment. I also have some private sector. I have somebody who approached me and said, look, you've been in the industry a long time. Have you ever considered training? So that's now become part of what I'm doing, is doing more training to young people coming through the sector. And so I think that everything, you can pick it, I'm not saying pick and choose, we're not always in that situation right now, but up to that time, I think that it's quite interesting because projects all vary, and you can kind of decide, you might take a project for 3 months and they may extend that. So it may lead to longer work for you as an individual anyway.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just laughing to myself because I was making a note when you were talking in the presentation about, you need to list out the skills that you've acquired as you go through your journey. And certainly for me, you were saying there, you are your marketing manager and everything else. I'm a web developer, social media manager, marketing manager, head of content, podcaster, YouTuber, webinar host, copywriter, and an accountant as well. None of which I'm trained for. But I've had to learn it, and you're right. The amount that I've learned has been absolutely colossal, but it's a steep learning curve.
Yeah, no, look, it is, Jed, and I couldn't agree more. And I think what I love, that's why I wanted to show the books at the end. The book by Richard Boller's, What Color Is Your Parachute? Honest to goodness, if anybody does one thing, just get that book from Amazon or wherever. It's a great book. I should be on commission from Richard because I'm always talking about his book wherever I go. And basically, in that book, it gives you, it says to you, list your skills as verbs. So really break it down. Don't just say I was a marketer, really break down what those skills are, and you might surprise yourself in terms of how many different things you could adapt to.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, I'm going to bring in Carolyn at this point, and we'll start taking the questions from our audience. Carolyn, are you there?
am indeed, Jed.
Hey, there you are.
I'm extremely relieved because 2 minutes ago I was breaking absolutely every one of Karen's rules. There was a cat sat on my shoulder. So this definitely, folks, this is a do as Karen says, not as Carolyn does. We do have some very interesting questions coming through now. One from Sean, talking less about the downturn and more about the fact that with automation and all the changes, a lot of jobs are becoming redundant. So Sean's in India. He's saying over 80% of the businesses are affected, with 40% facing complete shutdown, and will 25% of countries there. So greater adoption of technology, making more people redundant. So in honesty, are there actually jobs for the taking, or is the way out to create a job by setting up a new business?
Great question, Sean. Thank you for that. Look, it is a tough time, and let's make no bones about that, because the other thing is, even the vacancies that I alluded to earlier online, let's remember now that there are so many more people looking for jobs, so therefore that makes it twice as hard, because there's more people competing for the same vacancies. Okay, so I think that if you've got the opportunity to actually consider it, creating something for yourself as your own business, that is the best way. That is a really good way forward, because I think that you might be applying for roles, but in terms of if you've got a skill or something that might be required right now, that might be digital marketing or something like that you can do, well, why not try to be part of the gig economy doing that? If you're a person that writes marketing plans, there's plenty of online platforms where you can put your services up, etc. So if you've got the ability to create your own business, I think that would be the way to go forward. I do think also it's quite frightening when you first do that and you think, where's the work going to come from? But I think also it's about reaching out to those contacts that you know. And I've seen all sorts of innovation in recent times, people sort of doing jobs or, just coming up with new ideas where they can help people who perhaps don't have the time or the skill set to do it. So that would be my advice on that one. Thanks, Sean.
Fantastic. Now, there's three sort of questions, and I think this links to something that we heard this morning, which was, are we going to see the rise of a lockdown generation? And the fact that, although technically we're all in this together, some of us are more deeply in the do-do part of together than others. Yeah. So questions both from Tony and from Berendian, both about students. So Berendian, from the student's point of view, practical advice to students who are faced with looking for a job in 2021 after graduation, considering there are no jobs and lots of experienced people wanting to be rehired. Now, Berendian's based in South Africa, and a question there about particular relevance there. But Tony, who is, I believe, in the UK, saying, is it something where businesses could come in, given the number of students, what suggests that they, given the reduction in travel budgets to secure a job, would you suggest that they work without pay for 3 to 6 months? Don't you think employers should use this period to bring students into their business at no initial financial risk and take advantage of their skill set? So I think two perspectives on the same kind of issue. Thoughts for both of those audiences, Karen?
Brilliant. Thanks, Carolyn, and thanks. I'll take them one at a time. So thanks, Berendian. My home country is South Africa, so best wishes to you there. I lived in South Africa for quite some time, and I have actually got quite a lot of contacts there in the tourism industry as well. So if you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn, I'm happy to perhaps help you in that space. I'll come to you, Tony, in a minute. So when we talk about students, and look, I think that there is, there's a number of different things you can do. I always say, don't wait for vacancies to be advertised. And I've said that throughout the career, just even before when I was back in recruitment, think about companies that might be hiring right now, approach them, don't wait for vacancies to be advertised. So, if there's businesses in your local catchment area or those that, might be putting on teams or staff, approach them first and foremost. And to Tony's question from the UK, thank you, Tony, in terms of students coming into an organisation, perhaps working for 3 to 6 months. That seems like a long time without pay. But, if you're happy to work and show people your experience and your enthusiasm and how you do work, I think certainly that might be attractive to a business in hiring you, because I think students have got so much to offer. You know, they've learnt the theory and everything else, but they do need that practical experience to help them get ahead as well. So my advice would be reach out to those organisations that you know, businesses that you know, and I think that's really innovative thinking about trying to get our students sort of engaged and across some of the sectors. So thank you for those questions. I hope that answers what you need. Happy to take more information from you offline if I can be of assistance to you guys.
Right. Now, again, this is perhaps even an earlier stage for people in their tourism studies, Karen, is from Stu. Do you think it is still responsible to encourage young people now to take degrees in tourism and travel, especially because governments have suddenly started telling people in the sector they need to look at new skills and industries, brackets, kiwi fruit picking, anyone? So I think we've got a clue where Stu might be from that. Even before this, it was difficult to convince young people this was an industry with a great future. How do we do it now?
Well, good question, Stu. And if you're kiwi picking, then you might know my nephew Ashton, who also does the same thing there in New Zealand. But look, I absolutely, you know, I'm passionate. It's been my long-term career, like most of you on the call. I'm not going to say, you know, that we should give it up as a career option, because I'm still of the belief, I'm the glass half full girl. I'm still of the belief that things will bounce back. It's just going to take a bit of time. And it just might be that we have to do things in a different way. So if you're going into that career, you know, I think about the different career options within that path. But I do think that if you're doing a 3 or 4 year degree or more, that hopefully by then we will be coming out of the other end of where we're at now. Of course, it's different in every global location. Secondly, though, I think as an industry, Carolyn, we all have a role to play. And I know tourism talent in New Zealand, as an example, Jason and Dylan work very hard at, you know, working in the training space to encourage people to get into the industry as a serious career option. And I certainly need to do in Australia more. I need to engage more with a lot of the educational institutions and so on to remind them of what an important sector tourism is. So I'm going to say glass half full. I want the glass to be filled up, and I do believe that it still should be a consideration as we go forward. It might be right now you have to supplement your income doing other things, but I still think that in the future we will surely see, you know, aviation come back. I'm hopeful, and also hotels and other things open. Thanks.
Brilliant, thank you. Now, a question relating to the gig economy, Karen, from William, which is, how can you improve sales and attracting audiences and traffic using a gig economy format? How does it work? So I guess that's a little bit developing the point you made about bringing in talent to do some of those things using a gig economy. Anything to add on that, or that you can drill down a little bit further to help people think how that might work for them?
So in terms of actually them being aware of it, or can you elaborate on the question any or not?
That's literally what we have, which is to say, can you improve, so it literally is, can you improve sales and attracting audiences and traffic using a gig format? So I guess that might be a question about how do you engage people to do some of those things for you in terms of the gig economy. I mean, to me, that sounds like the virtual perfect use of it, but this is your area, not mine.
Yeah, no, that's good. Well, look, I think first and foremost, if our industry is adopting or does choose to adopt, which I can certainly say in New Zealand and here in Australia, I know since Tourism Talent launched the Gig Connect that there is some take up from really experienced people in that space. And therefore, I would suggest that, you know, if we talk, when we talked earlier, we looked at you know, around 80% of our tourism businesses being SMEs, for example. And what has been a challenge, I think, for a lot of those businesses, a lot of smaller businesses are owner operated, and respectfully, they might not have the same skill set that other people may bring through the gig economy. So, for example, if you are a business that hasn't to this point had the ability to hire a, let's just say, digital marketing strategist, for example, on a big salary for the year, your business might be able to hire somebody as part of the gig economy who's got those digital strategic skills, who can help you set up your business, and yet for much in a much more cost-effective way. So it might mean that the money that you're paying up front for somebody with those high skills is certainly, you know, going to be providing much more, I guess, insights and everything to your business, which in turn will lead to, I think, higher sales, because you're going to have hopefully a higher level of people working in your business with you.
Okay.
Sorry, just on that, on the gig economy, how important is it, Karen, for you to get gigs that complement each other within the industry?
Well, I think that's an important question as well, Jed. I mean, we refer to the gig economy also as the on-demand economy, you know, so when people are looking for different skill sets. But I think that, you know, I'll take myself as an example. I mean, I think some things complement, but you'd be also, if I take destination marketing as an example, when I was doing some contract work for a destination marketer, I wasn't then obviously choosing another destination to market as well, because that could be seen as a conflict of interest. But I might pick different things. So at the moment, for example, in myself, I am doing some work in recruiting, I'm doing some work in training, and that covers all sorts of training, customer service, marketing, any areas that I've been working with over the time. And then I'm also sitting on boards, and then I'm also working for local government, helping them with their economic development strategies. So I think it's important to get things that are non-conflicting, so that your businesses that you're working for feel comfortable that they, you know, you're working on their specific sort of projects. And I'm always transparent about those things too, Jed, because I think we have to be. It's a small tourism family sometimes, you know,
Absolutely.
So I think transparency is key.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Oh, new questions coming in. I'm just going to duck in and see what they were.
Oh, there you go.
Carolyn.
Okay, is it possible to assist and support students on the gig economy across borders? i.e., are there opportunities for that students from India for work from home?
Look, I think, you know, depending on who it is or what the business is, once again, I think it's reaching out to your own networks and contacts and seeing what it is that you can help them with. And I think in this day and age at the moment, most people know, and depending on where you are in the world, you know, here, for example, in Australia, some of our restrictions are easing, but people are still working from home. And I myself know some students here who've been quite innovative in saying, look, to myself as a, you know, person who's been in the industry 30 years plus, there are younger students who will help me with things who work from home. So for example, computer technology and those things that I'm absolutely hopeless at, I have a young student that helps me with that type of thing. He works from home, he travels to my house and helps me with my computer work and so on. So, you know, there's different things that you can be doing for different people. So I think about the skill set that you currently have. And as a student, you know, if you're a young student, I'm sure already that your digital skills are much greater than some people in my sort of age or generation set. And we need the young people to help us with that. So I think just think about who those people could be.
Is this kind of linked as well with the sort of the relatively growing trend of digital nomads, Karen? You know, whereby, you know, there are a group of people, okay, traditionally more being on the sort of the tech side of things, where, you know, so long as you got a laptop and Wi-Fi, good Wi-Fi, you can work from anywhere for any company. You know, so you could go to Bali, which I believe is great for digital nomads, because the Wi-Fi is super fast and everything else. So you could work from Bali for an Australian company or a New Zealand company or hell, a Thai company, whatever else. And geography is no barrier. And maybe, you know, do you think that as a result of COVID-19, where we're all been forced to work remotely, that's just kind of heightened that a little bit more now, where companies actually can employ people from completely different geographies, and you know, it can work really effectively for all parties.
Jed, couldn't agree more. And in fact, once I enhance my digital skills, that's the kind of job I'm looking for.
Me too, man. Me too.
So, you know, you see those ads sometimes come up on Facebook and the like saying, you know, have a laptop, you can work from anywhere. So I definitely do think it is that. And I think that our younger people, our younger generation of today, they really have fantastic digital skills. And it's just about looking at those and saying, how can we adapt those to generating income? So I definitely do think it's heightened, Jed. I think that's very much the case in this day and age. Have Wi-Fi, have laptop, will travel. It's very much that.
I can certainly say that I regularly work from locations all over the world and do my job. So I don't say I'm perfectly at the digital nomad stage yet, but very short term. Karen, I know you touched on the fact that, in fact, Tourism Talent was originally a New Zealand company, wasn't it?
Correct.
We've
Still
got
is,
a
yes.
question. Yes. We've got a question on how to get in touch with the New Zealand team from Guy in New Zealand.
Okay. Well,
so
thank you, Guy.
Free to share the details.
Yeah, no, that's good. I'll just go back to the last slide. So thanks, Guy in New Zealand. If you'd like, our website is there. So if you'd like to click on the website, and you'll see all of ours up there for both New Zealand and Australia. And we look forward to hearing from you. We're also on LinkedIn and Facebook, of course, so you can contact us via those means as well. And we'd love to hear from you. So thanks, Guy, for your interest. Thanks, Carolyn.
No worries. I think we've reached the end of the questions we have. Have you had any more come in on WhatsApp or anything like that, Jed?
I haven't checked WhatsApp. Nope, haven't got anything on WhatsApp. I've got a note from my mum to say that she's up and she's okay, but that's it.
That's good news, Jed.
Which is good news, exactly. We'll take that. Okay, I think we're kind of at a good time to start to wrap things up now. Anyway, so want to take this opportunity to thank you, Karen, for sharing your insights with us all this week. Been really, really interesting, and I think we've all learned a huge amount. Thank you to our audience as well, of course, for all of the wonderful questions. We will be posting the webinar up online in the WeTAC group pages on LinkedIn and Facebook later this evening. Hopefully, if I don't have any more Harry Potter films to watch with my daughters. Please do join us for our 11th episode in this series next Tuesday, where I have the honour of addressing you all as I take you through my session, which is entitled Recovery, Resilience and Regeneration, the Big Opportunity for Tourism Post-COVID-19. So please do join us for that if you can next Tuesday at the same time as usual. I'd now like to ask Chris Flynn, excuse me, President and CEO of WeTAC, to provide us with his closing remarks, if you'd like to join us, Chris.
Hey, Jed. Hey, Karen.
Hey.
How are you doing?
Right, thanks. Yeah? How are you?
Good. How do I look on camera? Have I still got my little horny things here from my lights? Probably have I? Shiny head. Yeah. Nothing I can do about that. Thanks, Karen. That was absolutely fantastic. And I've got to say, I loved all those nautical references. So well done.
You like that?
Oh, yeah.
Very subtle. I know you.
Very subtle, yeah. It's quite interesting what you and Jed were talking about a few minutes ago, actually. I was working for a large organization, international organization, a few years ago. And I was heading up the sales team, sort of nationally. And I was told that there was going to be a restructure and that I was going to be out of a job, but to continue to do my job and to contract people, but don't tell them what was going on.
Oh,
now,
heavens.
This lasted for 12 months before they actually did the restructure. So the issue I had with both myself and my team was, how do you stay motivated? So for 12 months, we just sort of hung out, not knowing what to do. So again, that issue of communicating and ensuring that your staff are aware of what's going on and just keeping them in the loop out of professional courtesy, I think is really important. It was certainly a big issue for that particular part of my life, that's for sure.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah, one thing I bet you don't know about me is that I'm a published author on this subject as well. So if you want to start promoting my book, I have no issue with that. I wrote a book a few years ago. It was about aging in the workplace, and with an aging population, the need, if you want to improve your productivity, to blend wisdom and experience with that of youth and ambition. And if you want to go out and buy it, it's on Amazon. I've just double checked. It's $8.53, and it's got 4 stars. So so there you go. But anyway, what came through loud and clear for me on all of that, Karen, was if you find yourself in this situation, and I don't think there is any tourism or travel company on this planet that hasn't been affected by COVID-19. It's immense. And of course, people are now going to be competing all over the world. But what I found really interesting and insightful from your presentation was the need for discipline and the need for routine. The fact that you might find yourself out of a job for whatever reason, or furloughed for whatever reason, you still have to maintain those standards. And I actually learned that some years ago. Get up early, do your work, stay on that time frame, stay on that mindset, because if you don't, it's easy to fall off the edge, and you lose focus. So I thought that was really really important and a really good insight. So I thank you for that. Karen, I'm going to leave you to it now, but I just want to sincerely thank you for all of that. That was a fantastic presentation, an immense amount of insight and knowledge there, and wisdom from yourself, which I'm sure all our listeners and viewers will really appreciate. And I'm absolutely convinced that this particular episode will be downloaded time and time again. So thank you for that. And just before I go, I just also want to thank all of our members, supporters, and followers, because of course we couldn't do any of this without you. And yeah, I'm going to leave you there now. So thank you, Karen, and back over to you, Jed.
Thanks a million, Chris. So all that's left to say really is final thanks again to Karen. Thanks to you all for taking the time out of your day to join us and to learn from Karen's insights. And a final thanks again, of course, to all of our supporters and sponsors, without whom we couldn't do this series at all.
Jed,
sorry, yeah.
We've just had Nigel come in with a late breaking question. Have we still got Karen on the line? Yes, we have.
Breaking news. I love this. Gosh, the drama. We've never had this before. The last drama.
Nigel, making an easy question.
Thank you, Nigel, for bringing this drama. Go on. This better be a killer question, by the way.
I literally just saw it, so I hope it is. So I can't take any responsibility for the quality of the question. So one of the challenges of facing a redundancy, especially at a senior level, is to find someone who will assist getting the best possible deal. The organization usually has experts offering advice. What should a sole employee do if there are no unions to go to get advice?
As a sole trader, so if they are looking for advice on these things, I think that there are, for example, in my own business, I'm not giving myself a free plug, but there are many businesses who will help you in that mentoring and coaching space. And, you could reach out to them because often they're very networked across, knowing which organizations are looking for people. And what I've found is that often it's through your contacts and your networks that you have how those opportunities arise. So I think that's what I would do, reach out to people in the industry, in the sector, people and put that word out there, because I know it's very difficult, and especially if you've been in a senior role for a long period of time and you're newly redundant, how do you go about that? So if it's Nigel, if you want to have further discussion offline, Nigel, I'm more than happy to, LinkedIn with myself or Jason, Dylan or Chris, and happy to have further dialogue with you. Thanks.
I think that would be worth it, Karen, because Nigel's actually said not as a sole trader, as an employee of a company. So I think it probably does need a little bit of clarity and perhaps something that should be an offline commentary.
Beg your pardon, Nigel. That's my interpretation. That's all good. Contact me on LinkedIn, Nigel. We'll have a chat. Thanks.
Okay, back to you, Jed, to do the final closing again.
Super stuff. No, that's great. I love the drama right at the very end. Like I say, it's unprecedented. Of course, is the expression of the time. No, that's it for us. Thank you all so much again for joining. Thanks again to Karen and to all of our sponsors and members. And we look forward to seeing you on Tuesday for the next session. Have a great afternoon. Have a great morning, and have a great day. All the best.